taste buds have changed. Okay, so do you have a handout?
Let's see if I've got
We didn't get very far as a
I
handout
have
last
remembered
week.
mine both weeks in a row. I'm very proud of myself.
Good job.
I would like to say.
So
Okay,
we're
good.
on
Thank you.
page
I needed
2
that.
At First Timothy.
I needed that.
Oh,
Thank
you're,
you.
yeah, it was good.
It's
It was
great.
good stuff.
It is
Um,
good stuff.
No, it's number 4.
Number 4.
Do you need number 4?
Yeah, I'm excited.
Do you mind if it's a little?
It is good stuff.
Okay.
Now my notes. I did this morning. I was like, oh wait. I gotta
You
get
get
my
my paper.
Bible
Yeah.
study paper before I leave because
Yeah.
I don't ever have time to go run get it before Bible study.
No.
Look, I'm just trying to get here on time now.
Yeah. So we're on page 2 at First
You gotta know
Timothy.
ourselves, right?
And
On page 3?
mine says page 2.
Two,
At Timothy.
okay.
We
Yep.
marked it, yeah. And so we've been going into the poverty mindset versus the stewardship mindset. And just to refresh really quick, because we didn't get far. Poverty mindset is fear-based, that money is evil, I just need enough to get by. And then kingly mindset is that the love of money is evil, but wealth is a tool for kingdom impact. And one of my favorite scriptures is Deuteronomy 8:18, where it talks about how you remember God, number 1. Number 2, he gives us the ability to gain wealth or skill, knowledge, etc. is what ability means. And then number 3, the reason why is to establish his covenant in the earth. And his covenant is always relational. There's a contract that Jesus Christ made with his blood. But it's a relational contract versus, I could enter into a contract with a business and never meet them, especially if they're out of town. But with him, he likes to have that. And then also, kings understand resources as responsibility, not greed. This was an interesting deal. I don't know why, but and I'm being facetious, but I seem to challenge people even without realizing I'm challenging them. Not sure why. But anyway, so it was one of the first, it was the second time I had been invited to minister on wealth in Truth or Consequences at a church. I went there for 10 years until they were challenged that I don't believe you can't have wine. So anyway, I was excommunicated. But anyway, so I get up there and I'm teaching on wealth, and I'm teaching on how it is a vehicle to expand the kingdom. And it's not just the money. Like, you can give the money that you earn, which is definitely important. But the idea that your business, whether you own it or you work in it, provides you access to people you probably would never have access to. It's like if you're a pastor, your access to people is probably going to dominantly be your congregation. When you're in business, you rub shoulders with politicians, law enforcement, community leaders, all those types of people, but also your clients. So I've been able to minister more outside of the official 501c3 ministry in my business. So I was talking about it, and then I was talking about wealth, kind of along these lines, and I could tell there was a lady in the congregation that just thought I was the devil. You could tell. It was all over her face. Now, her background was, she's actually Native American. She might be Pueblo, and she was raised like barefoot, free as a bird, just did, whatever as a kid. And for her, wealth was evil. And business owners were greedy and evil. And she even put that on her Facebook. And usually, if people put stupid stuff on there, I can ignore it for a while. And then you get to the point where, okay, now I've had it. So I actually messaged her. And I said, you've disparaged 95% of the church that either own a business or work. And I would like to know if you've ever talked to me as a business owner or anybody else before you just go on there and say we're all greedy. I mean, I was mad. And I said, you show me in scriptures where owning a business is wrong. Job owned a business. Abraham owned a business. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And so we got in like a religious doctrine tiff. And I'm like, well, we'll just agree to disagree, but you're wrong, basically is what I said. So anyway, fast forward a year later, We see each other at church. To her credit, she came up to me, gave me a hug, and I'm all, you know,
The usual. Yeah.
do you get cooties from hugging me because I'm greedy? Like, you know, you need to go cast, you know, demons off of you or something for giving me a hug. So I had a bad attitude. So I preach again. He always wanted me to preach on wealth. And so afterwards, we actually landed at the same hotel at the same time. I'm like, oh, wow. I might have to hear, you know, stupid stuff again. So anyway, I get out of the car and she goes, I'm going to apologize.
And then you felt bad for having a bad attitude?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
So I said, okay, for what? And she goes, I was completely wrong. And I said, uh-huh. How'd you figure that out, though? And she goes, well, after our messaging tiff, she said, our business exploded. So they actually, they owned a business, which was so ironic. And their drinks are delicious. They used to sell them at Albertsons. I haven't seen them for a while. But they were like all natural, no sugar, like root beer flavor. I mean, they're so good. I used to buy them regularly. She said, and it exploded. And I was like, God, I have to rethink my doctrine because we have more money than we know what to do with. Like, we don't know what to do with all this. I'm like, oh, that must have been super difficult.
Yeah.
And she goes, it actually was. I said, no, I get it. And she said, so I got in the Word and realized, wow. And so we just, they launched like an organization. They were able to give to her tribe in meaningful ways and do a bunch of stuff. So that's what you're up against when it comes to understanding a Christian's perspective when it comes to money. You got some that are like poverty is from God, and you got some that, you know, money is from the devil, and then you have some that they understand it is a tool. That's it. Just like you use a chainsaw to cut down trees, you got some lunatic that may use it to cut up people.
Well,
You know,
I know
it's
the
not
Jews
the
always,
chainsaw.
the Jews always thought that if you were wealthy, it's because you had favor of God, which you do, but it's not the only thing, because we see from the Pharisees and the Sadducees that they might have had money, but they did it by hook and crook type thing.
Yeah,
So-
well, the favor of God surrounds the assignment.
Right.
And so that takes us to the next thing is, you know, where kings understand that resources are responsibility. The level of wealth there's like a couple conditions. The level of wealth God gives you is dependent. Number one is dependent on your assignment. You know, some assignments, the reason you were born, require more money. The end. But you don't get that access unless there's like a heart transformation. You know, God has to deal with poverty mindsets. He has to make sure you can steward wealth well. He has to make sure that there's a generosity. All of those things. There has to be a dependence on him regardless of how much money is in your account. And then the other thing is your ability to multiply it, to add to it. So if you look at the parable of the talents and the parable of the minas, he gave he gave all of them in the minas, he gave them 5,000. The reason he gave all of them the same amount is he had faith in all of them to multiply it, not add to it, but multiply, right? And the one didn't have faith that he could do that. In the talents, he gave them differing levels based on their ability. And in the talents, they added to, they did not multiply. So the goal is he gets you into a position of stewarding wealth, and then the outpouring of the wealth in not just money, it's assets, even relationships. Like, why would he give certain relationships to us if we're not ready to steward them well? You know, like he'll tell, I'm sure y'all have experiences where he'll be like, don't become friends with that person right now, they're not healthy. Or, hey, you probably shouldn't date that person, they're psycho, and they'll be on a podcast later called Outline of a Murder. You know, like, there's just specific things that he will protect us from. However, if we're stubborn enough, we can actually override his will and get him anyway. So that's why sometimes you see people in ministry or with wealth that probably shouldn't be, because they've not dealt with a lot of stuff and they end up falling later. So all that to say, he looks for how well we take care of our vehicle, our home, how well we take care of our decisions, how we spend our money, how we give our money.
For example, with the little.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is a little. So all of those things are extremely important because the reason we're here, like if you look at the money system actually is an earthly system that the Lord put in place. So the ability to buy, sell, and trade was in the garden because we know Lucifer fell because of the abundance of trading. He wanted access to that realm. In fact, the Lord showed me something interesting this morning. I've been reading through Matthew, and I was kind of going back, highlighting a few things that caught my attention. The Magi, of which we know it was a whole caravan, they show up. The Lord is probably about 2 years old. And it says specifically, they followed the star to the house. They entered the home to see the baby. They worshiped him. Then they gave him their treasures. So worship and wealth together. And we know that the first place wealth is used in the Bible is the Hebrew word kabod, which is the word for God's glory. And when you look up the Hebrew definition, wealth is one of them. So the enemy recognizes there is a glory tied to wealth. And that's why he told the Lord, if you worship me, so here we have it, I will give you the glory or the wealth of the nations. He knows there is a tie. And then the Lord also made it plain, you cannot worship me and mammon. You will use your mammon to worship me, but you can't worship mammon and me, right? So when we give to the Lord, whether it's our tithes, whether it's a working believer offering, that is a form of worship. But it's all like that whole, like if you don't tithe, the devil will have access to your finances, or God will rebuke the devil. That was Old Testament. In the New Testament, we rebuke the devourer, and we're not under the law. So you have to be careful. I tithe I don't go without tithing, but I don't believe it should be a law, because once you go under law, you're obligated to fulfill all of it. So we have to be careful in even our giving. So like if I feel any type of pressure or anything of that nature, or if I don't have a good attitude about it, I won't. I'll wait, and then I'll give it. So I don't not give it, I just wait till I have a good attitude. But there's just a lot involved, you know? And I remember years ago when we drove cars, one, like I think I told you, called it the brown turd. Love that little car. It's ugly as sin. Had rust on it when we got it, but we took really good care of that car. That car was spotless. We drove it, changed the oil, same thing with our homes. When we rented, it was like we owned the house, and we would take care of it unless it was something bigger that we needed them to take care of. So these are things he looks for. Another reason this is important is if you can't take care of like temporary and unimportant things, he's not going to give you spiritual riches, which is what we want. That's the goal. And so wealth is a test common to all men. If you can steward wealth well, you will have greater access to true riches, spiritual riches. So kings, that's why they view it as a responsibility. But it does not negate enjoying it either. I am all about enjoying it. In fact, I'm about to plan a 2-night trip to Alamogordo just to see the pistachios and, you know, go to a few places there for my birthday. I'm going to enjoy it. Now, would I rather it go to my properties? Yes, but I've got plenty. I can go ahead and, you know, enjoy myself. So that's the, you know, like Jake mentioned, you know, that's the balance there of, you know, some people enjoy their money and stuff way too much. Other people don't enjoy it at all. And so there's definitely a balance there. So in 1 Timothy 6, 9 through 10 on page 2, it says in the New King James, those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Do any of you have a concordance or an ability? I'm curious what the word love there is, if it's lust or if it's, no?
I do not have it.
Does someone have chat? Can y'all look up? Do I put it in here? Oh, never mind. Good grief, it's in my notes.
Is it? Oh, I have this most important.
The fact that I doubted I would have the definition is ridiculous. Okay, so this, I mean, it seems pretty straightforward. The problem is if you're like me, where you know part of the reason you were born was to make money, it can become a problem. Because I don't love money, but I know I'm anointed to make it. So what does it actually mean to love money? Because you can be poor and still love money, right? So it's not the money you have, it's the heart condition. Okay, so the word love there is a word that's used for desire, but it's not the typical Greek word that we see for strong desire and lust, which is in the Greek, it's 1939, the word. Instead, Paul uses a variation of one of two words that expresses one's will, bulo and thelo. So bulo is a desire that might not be fulfilled, like where the Lord, or I think Peter might have written it, where he said God desires that all be saved. That's bulo. That's a desire of God that he knows will not happen. There's not going to be 100% salvations, okay? So people have a free will, the end. The other one, before I get on to it, bulo is more passive in nature. Philo or thelo is active for will and desire, and it's absolute with God. It's going to happen. So like when he said, seed will come from you and will crush the enemy's head, that's a thelo or thelo. It's going to happen. I think it's thelo, actually. It's going to happen. The end of the age, it's going to happen. There's no one's going to be able to stop that, okay? So in the Bible, when you see that word, it is something that has been decreed that cannot be stopped. Now, Paul uses bulomai in the Greek. So this shows us that this is an inward bent or predisposition to being rich. It's an unconscious willing or an inner decision or thinking that fuels thelo. Now, what does this mean? This is a person who they have the strong desire, the bulo, but it's the driving force of every single decision, because for them, being wealthy is not optional. Does that make sense? They've made wealth thelo. They're going to do it no matter what. So what happens is they will walk over anybody. It doesn't matter. They will put the pursuit of wealth above the pursuit of God.
I like the way the Passion puts it, the second part there on 10. Some people run after it so much that they have given up their faith. Craving more money pushes them away from faith into error, compounding misery in their lives. So the very thing that they're trying to get, they end up abandoning to pursue the wrong thing, really.
And that's the thing, like in my background, it was very interesting because my dad was always able to make money easy, but he also lost it very easy. And typically that was when there was a divorce. So everything would just be destroyed. So then, when me and Mike married, we made $5,000 a year. That was in 1991. So 1992. So you can imagine $5,000 a year. God had to literally make money out of thin air for us to make it, which he did. So went from that, and then I remember the fear when we started making wealth, because I learned to steward. I learned what a budget looks like. I learned all that stuff. And I was afraid I was going to really screw it up and I would become greedy. So what the Lord told me is he said, the way you fight greed, because again, some people are anointed to make money. He said, the way you fight greed is, number one, you stay humble. And I was like, okay, what does that look like though? And he said, that's where you believe for things that you could go buy. And then he said, number two, you're generous. And I was like, okay, I can handle that. And then he taught me the working believer offering. I'm about to burn up. Like, is it like hotter than H2O?
Well, I think that heating vent runs right through here, probably gives a little extra.
Gee. So humility by demonstrating dependence on Him, and then the working believer offering were two keys for me. But I mean, I think that is in everything though. Like even like if you think about that prophetic word that you shared from Lana, one of the things it talked about is the new season God is bringing us into. Former strategies and skill sets will not work. One of the best things a Christian can do is make themselves uncomfortable on purpose, because it requires you to learn new things and to seek God. And so in anything, we can get dependent on the system. We can get dependent on the strategies that have worked in the past, like even praying for people. It's stunning how the Lord never did anything the same way.
Yeah.
You know, He'd spit on one dude, make mud for another one. You know, I mean, He would lay hands on some, speak the word on others. I mean, he just did not ever box Himself in, and that requires humility. So we don't want to be that person where we will do whatever we have to get wealthy and even sacrifice our faith. That guy that, you know, was wealthy, he said, I just need to build bigger barns. And then the word of the Lord was, this day I'm going to require your life of you. And what did that serve him? It didn't serve him at all. However, the other side of that is a righteous man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. So I'm working to leave a physical and a spiritual inheritance to grandkids if my kids ever have any. If not, it stops with them, right? So I thought that was interesting. And then the word love there is, I don't know how to pronounce it, Philaguria, and it's a lover of money, or it's someone that is covetous. So phileo is the Greek word for affection, and it's a step below agape. So we're supposed to have agape. That's love that only comes from God. And Peter, when he denied him 3 times, you know, he would say, do you love me, agape? And Peter would say, I phileo you. So knowing where your heart is also key to not falling. If we have a high estimation of ourselves or an incorrect estimation of ourselves, it can actually lead to our failure more than anything else, I think. So we need to consider ourselves as well. Now, and the proof that phileo is right before agape is in 2 Peter 1:7. Now, money is neutral, the heart is not, and so kings need to be very aware of where their heart is. And again, recognize, like, remember how Dorina said that God told her to pay attention to the teaching 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago because she needed to hear what was said? So I followed up with her later and I said, what was it that you needed to hear? And she said, I was praying the just prayers. If you'll just give me enough money to pay my bills this month. Thank you for just taking care of me. Just this, just that. She said, I was limiting him within the confines of my just prayers. And I was like, yeah, you don't ever want to pray if you will just give me enough.
Yeah.
Because that confines him within the boundary, because we are sovereign and he interacts with us as sovereigns. He's the supreme and we submit our sovereignty to him, but he will respect our wishes. So I tell people, believe for millions. I don't care. Even if you get 10%. Do y'all know the dollar amount that makes you wealthy in this country? Do you have any idea?
Like 200, I don't know.
I'd say 100,000. I don't really know. The wealthy. When you're considered wealthy.
I have no idea.
500,000.
Okay, 500.
And it's not just money. It's
Your
property,
assets.
your assets, right?
Yeah.
Now, by the way, a house where you have a mortgage payment is not an asset until it's making you money. Just so you know. But anyway, yeah, $500,000 is all it is to be considered wealthy. So we need to make sure, again, that some people are called to make money, some people are called to, like Mother Teresa, live among the lepers and take care of them. Wealth is relative. It's not the dollar amount. It is what God entrusts you with to perform the will of God for your life, okay? Now, you had quoted it in the Passion. Well, let me go back up. Okay, so covetousness is a love of money. It also means to hoard away. It's connected with extortioners, thefts, plans of fraud. So you can see it's not being frugal, it is you're hoarding it away and you're getting it unjustly. You're bribing someone for it. You're stealing from people. Even like imbalanced scales. Did y'all know there was a guy that went to Walmart and he put meat on a scale?
Some of that video.
Yeah, that's unjust scales.
Yes.
The meat came back to what, like 5 pounds, but it was only 2.5. It's like double
Yeah.
the weight of the meat, so they could charge more. And so Walmart's like, we just get it in, we don't package it. So whoever's sending us the meat, they're the ones doing that, but still, right? That is theft. You know, taking a pencil or a paper clip, that is theft unless you ask for it. I remember the Lord was like, did you ask permission to take that paper clip? I'm like, no, I forgot it was on my papers. So I took it back and they're like, oh, you can take a paper clip. I said, I will never take a paper clip unless I have permission. And they're like, okay, weirdo. So, and then of course, also plans of fraud. So defrauding someone, which the unjust scales come into as well. So being wealthy isn't the bad thing. It's the love of money that leads to the deceitful and theft behaviors it is. And then of course in the Passion it says, those who crave the wealth of this world slip into spiritual snares. They become entrapped by the troubles that come through their foolish and harmful desires, driven by greed and drowning in their own sinful pleasures, and they take others down with them into their corruption and eventual destruction. Now notice the slip. So if you've ever been on a slope and you start sliding down, you can't stop yourself. It's just gravity. And notice it's connected to other harmful desires. You will never see a greedy person that's not also involved in some type of sexual sin or fraud or
Gluttony.
destructive, gluttony. Yeah, gluttony is a sin. I was just reading that today and I'm like, no one ever preaches that. And
They
it's
don't.
100%. It was actually in a book. I'm like, but yeah, there's all kinds of troubles because the greediness isn't confined just to money. That's the thing. Greed is a insatiable desire for more. It's not just wealth.
I think we can see that in Hollywood. They're so dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And their families, therefore, they're all just dysfunctional terribly, and they don't even realize it.
Even like the need for attention. Like I do obviously a lot of true crime with the podcast, and I had someone ask me the other day, what is a narcissist? Because she is divorcing one. And I said, there's an insatiable need for attention with a narcissist. They cannot handle not getting it. And that's what you'll see with them. And so that's why there'll be reputation management, gaslighting, all those things come into play because they can never be wrong and they can never be at fault. And then that typically leads to an insatiable desire for sex, which leads to adultery. And there's just so much involved there. So our responsibility as believers is to tap into the fruit of self-control, which is actually, like when you look at the fruit of the Spirit, which is in Galatians chapter 5, I believe, verses 21 and 22, it's actually one fruit. It's love. All the other fruits are the manifestation of love. So if you love yourself and God, you'll love others. Therefore, you'll have self-control. You'll be kind. You'll be generous. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that comes with practicing a renewing of the mind too, because if you're a stinker, you have to learn not to be a stinker before you can be kind. Just saying. Not that I have experience with that at all.
You know what's funny? Well, I guess it's not that funny, but so out of college, I started my career, and then that's when I started trading and everything. And I was like, I always believed in God and Jesus, but I never practiced it, and it was always just on the back burner.
Yeah.
And I would always tell myself, I was like, once I hit $1 million, then I'll be fine, then I'll be content, and then I could go, go back to Jesus. And,
Yep.
And so I was chasing the money.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. You're probably anointed to do that, but it was out of order. If that makes sense.
Yeah, because I just had this thought where it was like, because I knew I had this like kind of greed for money. And I just always thought like, if I do actually, follow God, He's gonna keep me away from it.
That's a
So
poverty
that's why I
mindset.
was
Yep.
like, I'll wait till I get to it, and then I'll go,
Yeah.
go towards.
So is it surprising for you to learn that wealth is a part of who He is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was always just under the belief of just like, all you need is Him, like, you could be poor or
Live on a
like,
hippie
live on it, or just like
Drinking lemonade.
well, I always had this like I guess like perception of like His disciples as being broken poor, and I was always under the assumption, well, I mean, they didn't have anything, and they were like His main guys, so I don't expect to have anything if I follow Him. So
Right.
I'm just gonna wait till I get everything I want, and then I'll follow
Yeah.
I
Him.
think that's the misinterpretation
It is.
of
It is, but
putting
it's
everything
very
down
common.
and you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very common,
is.
and you talking about that too shows the danger that the doctrine of poverty causes. What would have happened? Now you probably would have gone to heaven because you said that you had a belief in the Lord and all that beforehand. But people that don't know Him, that are not born again, and they do that, and then they're like, "Well, once I make all this money, then I'll get saved." They could die before that's ever accomplished. And so that's why we have to rightly divide the word of truth. So here's the truth. The truth is if you look throughout the Bible, every one of His people were extravagantly, outrageously wealthy. So we've got Abraham probably at over $1 billion. Joseph, the money he managed there's no amount we can put on it. If we calculate Job's possessions, they're saying he was probably at $3 billion. One of them, maybe David, was at about $7 billion when you add up all the shekels of gold and silver. During Solomon's time, he was so wealthy, we can't put a number on the wealth, but silver was so common, they would just pile it in the streets. That is stunning. And so you don't see that. You don't see that. And a lot of what happens is the rich young ruler, that story right there, is one of the reasons poverty is taught. The other, because they say that being wealthy is bad, because the Lord said it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a wealthy man to get into heaven. And then you also have where the disciples were businessmen. And right before they left the Lord, or left their occupation, they had that huge catch. Where do you think that went? You know what I mean? And then you have the Lord. He did depend on His Father to provide for His needs. So what did He do? He sent wealthy women. So, I mean, it's just amazing. And then when He said, well, the Son of Man has no place to lay His head, He wasn't talking about being homeless. He was talking about He was an itinerant minister. And so He didn't have a home. Peter did. Peter maintained his home. He would actually go back to it and they would stay there. And then you have, even after He's resurrected, they have another hall. And then where did the gold and the frankincense, all of that go that the Magi brought? Overnight, His parents became wealthy for His care. I mean, it's wherever the presence of God is, there is wealth. That's the thing. Because wherever God is, there's His glory. And in His glory is His splendor, His majesty, and His wealth. Our job is to learn how to steward that well. So, yeah. I remember when I was a sinner, I didn't want to get born again because I knew if I got born again, I'd have to quit drinking and doing drugs. So at least with you, it's just earning money.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think there's a lot of those people that just want to sow their wild oats first.
Yeah.
We all have moments that we're stinkers.
Oh,
yeah.
Like, because none of us are perfect. So
Yeah. It was funny. I went to that Legends of Classic Rock and they played an AC/DC song at the end, which that was my band, and it was Highway to Hell. And I was like, I wish they would have picked a different one, because I was telling Kendra, my friend, I said, when I was a sinner, I did not listen to that song because I knew where I was going.
And you didn't want to be there.
I did not want to be there. But, it is important to understand that with God there is wealth. And that's why the poverty doctrine can be so dangerous. And I wonder how many people were born to start businesses and to generate wealth. And by the way, another thing that people that are able to generate wealth more easily maybe than others need to know is you're not an ATM machine either for ministries. That aggravates me. I actually think business men and women should be on elder boards because they think completely different. And they're very cognizant of money and budget and all those things.
I think Trump's a
and wisdom.
perfect example of that.
Yep. So never allow someone to reduce you to an ATM either. And I think that's important because they're not in all churches, but in some parts of the church, there are denominations and congregations that view the wealthy as only ATM machines to fund church projects, and even pastors can get that mentality sometimes. So we have to make sure that we're never.
Well, it's that whole, well, they have it so they can just, no, it's not just because they worked hard for that. It's not their job to make sure that you can do this because they have money. That's not their place.
That's not their place. I have friends that are probably multimillionaires. I don't know how much money they have now, but their tithe is a lot, and so I said, so on your tithe, because I was curious, I said, I know that you guys make a lot of money. Do you give it to just one place, like your local church? And she said, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And I said, why? And she said, because we have seen churches ruined by coming into too much money through a tithe or an offering. And she said, and the Lord let us know where we go, they're not able to steward that well. And so we actually divide it up. She said, but we have been in churches where they're able to handle wealth well, and we have given our 100% tithe. Well, that goes against what they teach about tithing in churches.
Rockefeller, the church he went to, he set up a foundation or a trust or whatever where it would always have enough. There's no longer a church there because there was no longer any need for anyone else to ever give anything. And it's not even a church. But
everything is around money, including ministries. That's important to know. So it's religious to think, well, God will provide for all of them. How do you think He's going to do that? He does it through us. The end. However, you do have to be careful, and that was eliminating the need and the dependence on the Lord for that church.
And it robbed the congregation of feeling like they were giving to God because it had already been,
and if we go back to
given.
2 Corinthians chapter 9, where it talks about what happens when people give to the working believer. Listen to this in verse 12. 2 Corinthians chapter 9. And actually we could start at verse 11. So he talks about, giving to the working believer, which we've gone over, so you can watch past teachings on that. And then it says, you will be abundantly enriched in every way as you give generously on every occasion. Again, he's talking about giving to the working believer. For when we take our gifts to those in need, it causes many to give thanks to God. The priestly ministry you are providing through your offering not only supplies what is lacking for God's people, it inspires an outpouring of praises and thanksgiving to God Himself. So what's happening here? It's exactly what you're talking about. When they give to working believers, the ones that receive the gift, they give thanks to God. They're not thanking us. They know God gave them that money through that vessel, right? But also, they do an outpouring of praises and thanksgiving to God Himself as your extremely generous offering meets the approval of those in Jerusalem. It will cause them to give glory to God. So now they're giving glory to Him, all because of your loyal support and allegiance to the gospel of Christ, as well as your generous-hearted partnership with them toward those in need. Because of this extraordinary grace which God has lavished on you, they will affectionately remember you in their prayers. So now you've got them praying for you. Those are all the blessings we get as people who give.
And I also think
we're also showing generosity, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Well, and I think too that, it's talking about the person that's receiving, it's outpouring of praises and thanksgiving. But if we have the right heart about it, I think when we have it to give, we recognize, God, I'm so glad that you gave me this amount so that I can give.
Oh, 100%.
And it's us showing obedience to God. So we are being obedient to God, so then He knows that when He asks us to do something else, then we will be, because we have to show that we will be obedient this time.
Yeah.
So He will.
Well, that's like my story I told you years ago when we, giving $20 away was like giving $200 because we had an $800 deficit every month. And so I had $25, I believe, and I knew I was supposed to give $50, but I didn't have it. There was no money in the cushions. There was no money in the purse. It's like, I have $25. So I was like, Lord, I know I'm supposed to give this man $50, but I don't know where to get it. So I was on my way to give the $25. And I got a call from a computer client. I don't even do my computer business at this point. And I get a call from a computer client. He's like, can you come by the house? For some reason, I can't. And I don't remember what it was. I'm like, yes. So I get over there. I work on his computer. It takes me 5 minutes. I normally charge like 50 or something. And he said, how much? I said 25. He's like, okay. And I had my $50 because I was new in it. I was digging myself out of debt. I knew what I was supposed to give, didn't have it, and immediately God provided. And I had so much joy on that, and I was smiling the whole way to give that money. And that was when I would give it to Richard Masterson at A-Key in the parking lot, like we're exchanging drugs, because I didn't want the people to know who was giving them the money. But anyway, we're kings and we're priests, and this is our priestly ministry that causes the people that receive to rejoice and give glory to God and pray for us, and it causes us to have joy as well. The only time joy in giving to a working believer has left me is when I get into performance. It's like, well, maybe you should work more, or maybe you should, and then I get into judgy pants, and I'm like, that is terrible, and that is ugly. So I take the judgy pants off, I get my happy giving pants on, and then I go and give. But I refuse. I refuse to give with a bad attitude. I refuse to give if someone's pressuring me. Hell will freeze over before I hand over a penny if someone's pressuring me to give. I don't care if it's a church service or it's someone else. No, I won't do it. So now, if God is telling me to give, but not in that environment, I'll do it later. Because sometimes ministers can be horrible when it comes to that. So I want to be clear. Money is not the root of all evil. It is the pursuit at the expense of everything that is. And it's caused a lot of Christians to think that poverty is honorable, to think that money is evil. Like Jake's story. I mean, it's such a powerful.
We see in the last days, silver and gold aren't going to be worth anything. I mean, basically, it's, money is not going to be where it's at.
Yeah, that's very true, because it'll be under the rulership of the Antichrist, unfortunately. And that's why I say, every dollar earned is warfare, because it's out of the enemy's hands. If you were to take a dollar bill, of course now a lot of it's electronic, but if you were to take dollar bill, $5, it doesn't matter, and put it through a spectrometer, I think is what they're called, cocaine would be on it, marijuana would be on it. I mean, there's no telling what would be on it. Other, people's DNA would be on it. When you think about the absolute destruction and evil that money can purchase, and the fact that we can earn it and take it out of the enemy's hands, I love that.
At the post office,
love that.
At the post office, I get a lot of, cash and stuff. And 2 times I got these bills, and they had this stamp, and it was like George was here. I don't know what the name of it, but it tracked the money. You could go, and it had something on there where you could go and say, it arrived here. And I did. I went in there, and you could see everywhere where people had used it and then sent it on. And so I put it, post office and stuff. And then, of course, it went on wherever it went on.
Were you surprised?
I had never seen it back before. Yeah, there was, the it had, you could see when it was issued
Yeah,
and stuff, and it had been already in a lot of places by the time I got a hold of it. And I thought, and then how many people don't even go online and register, that they got it.
yeah,
So probably double or triple whatever I saw.
yeah.
But yeah, so look at your money every once in a while and see where that dollar bill
I've seen
has
that
been.
before.
Have you seen
Yeah.
that before? It's kind of, did you ever go online? Yes, there you go. But next time go online and see, because it was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about, the enemy, and I think we did an entire series on wealth is warfare, or the warfare of wealth, or something a couple years ago at our Bible study. But one of the things that was interesting that you see the enemy that he did is, let's see, is it Ezekiel 38? I think talks about his fall. Let's see. Let me get to, and then Isaiah 14, I believe. Okay, yeah. So Isaiah 14 and then Ezekiel 28, I bet, because it's double. Okay, you say, I am a God, but you're not. You set your heart as a God. Okay, yeah. So in Ezekiel 28, this is the main text that the Lord used to show me the enemy and his downfall. And Jake, when you read this, because the Passion, unfortunately, I think you have to buy Ezekiel separate. I might have it.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah,
that's.
and he does have Ezekiel out, but he probably isn't going to put it in a full Bible until he has all the books done. But anyway, you can get it separate. But when you read it in like the New King James or something else, there's a dual application prophecy, and this happens a lot, where the Lord will give a prophecy like to a king, but he's also referring to the enemy or something spiritual. This is a perfect example of this. So in Ezekiel 28, 11 through 19, it's a prophecy against the king of Tyre, but also he's speaking to Lucifer and why he fell. And one of the things that he talks about is where it says, every precious stone was your covering. And then in verse 13, the workmanship of your timbrels and pipes was prepared for you on the day you were created. Lucifer was made of musical instruments. He was actually the lead worship band member in heaven. And so what he would do is he would walk across the fiery stones in the throne room, and as the fire hit the precious jewels he would be made of, he would just begin to worship with his entire being, because he was made of musical instruments. And that's what it talks about. You were the anointed cherub who covers. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of the fiery stones. You were perfect in your ways until iniquity was found in you. What was the iniquity? The very next sentence, by the abundance of your trading, you became filled with violence. That word trading is trading. Buying and selling, using money. Okay? And so I personally have some ideas on how that occurred. And then here in Isaiah 14, verses 12 through 16, maybe 17. Yeah, 17. 12 through 17. He's talking about Lucifer. He says, how you have fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning, how you were cut down to the ground. For you said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will set in the mount of the congregation, and I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. That, with Ezekiel, shows that not only was there greed, but there was also, he began to glory in his own beauty and skill. And so, again, greed isn't just money. It's thinking you're more than you actually are in an ungodly way. And getting stubborn where I will do this, I will do that, I will do this. So whenever I plan my day or week even, I'll be like, this is what I want to accomplish, but I also have learned to be flexible because Holy Spirit may have other ideas. And that's just an active way to prevent from getting into that I will do this, because I'm stubborn as heck. And I've got to really watch that.
So, yeah, basically Satan got into that same trap as the guy that was gonna build all the barns. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this.
I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that.
And when he thought he was all that in a bag of chips and
he found out he was a bunch of error.
He got thrown to the ground and the
Translation.
Yeah, so, yeah, but I could see that same trap.
Mm-hmm.
Once he accumulated the wealth, he began to think, it's because of my skill, my beauty, my, me.
And the worship and wealth is connected there again. He was the lead worshiper, and he saw that wealth was used to worship God, and that's what he wanted. He wanted the worship, and he knew the avenue for it was wealth. And so you'll see that correlation. In fact, the Hebrew word for worship and work is the same. So our work is our worship. So when you think about it, Jake, like where you work, but also when you're trading, that's a form of worship if you make it that way. In other words, Lord, I know you've anointed me to gain wealth. Give me wisdom, give me strategy, and you're working with him to do it. But if it's apart from him, that's where the problem can arise, right? So even when I'm with my clients, my mindset coaching clients, or I'm doing their social media, God gave me that business. He's my business partner. And so I'm always conscious and aware of what he's saying. You know what I mean? And it's neat because you get to use strategy. You get to be shrewd. You know, I can't just, I got a person that doesn't even know the Lord, just bam, slap them upside the head. With scripture, I have to build that trust currency. How do I do it? They hire me. And they get to trust me, and I say, okay, now I'm going to put on my minister's hat. And that may be days, weeks later, but I get to minister to them because I've built trust through my business. It's just a neat thing. It's a really neat thing.
And you hear the stories with Trump where somebody's house burns down.
And he buys them a new one. He'll never tell you either.
Whatever. But he's a very generous man. Mm-hmm. And I think, he says a lot of things I won't say that I don't agree with, but I don't agree with the way he says them. Let's put it that way. But I think he has such a generous heart.
Yeah.
And I think God honors that generosity.
Yeah.